Welcome everyone. My name is Faulkner and I'm the online event coordinator for staff development for educators. I'd like to thank you for joining us today for Games That Teach 10ness, grades K through 2 with Eliza Thomas. Before we start, there are a few things you should know. To allow for Eliza to be heard clearly, we do place all attendees on mute. Please use the questions box on your screen throughout the webinar to ask any questions. These will be used for our Q&A period at the end of the presentation. The session is being recorded, and assuming no technical difficulties, you'll receive a link to the archive within 48 hours, as well as a link to a certificate of participation that you can download and print. Finally, at the end of today's presentation, you'll receive a short survey, and by completing the survey, you do assist us in providing future complimentary webinars. Now a little bit about SDE. At SDE, we believe educators have the most important job in the world, and it's why it's our mission to empower pre-K through 12 educators across the country with sustained professional development solutions that are not only research-based and rigorous, but also practical, innovative, and fun. Our goal is to help you create environments that prepare your students for the evolving demands of the 21st century. Together, we can create extraordinary classrooms. We're pleased to have Eliza Thomas joining us for today's webinar. As director of the Northwest Montana Educational Cooperative, a consortium of 23 districts serving over 11,000 students, Eliza Thomas supports math implementation, writes and refines curriculum, creates pacing and curriculum maps, and more. She supports teachers in personal math development and classroom instruction through ongoing and sustainable professional development. Eliza has taught math at grade levels from preschool through college and is the author of the recently published book, Math Play, 40 Engaging Games for the Differentiated Classroom. Welcome, Eliza. At this point, I'm going to turn the presentation over to you.
All right. Well, good afternoon, everybody, and I hope you've had a chance to get settled in and that you're hearing everything okay. If you want to play along, you can go ahead and grab a few items. If not, no worries, and you can just sit back and enjoy and join in on the fun of some of these games. If you are going to play, you'll want 10 items of some sort, and I emphasize here that they can be anything from jelly beans to regular beans to bears. I'll be using some puffs and some penguins because I can. You could also grab a deck of cards and one die if you would like to. So to start out, one of the things we want to think about is why is 10 important? And one of the biggest shifts that we're seeing in education is that we're using things as foundational blocks so that students can build the understanding over time. And if they have a deep understanding early on of concepts such as 10, then over time they can add on to those concepts with areas such as computation, into fractions, moving on into measurement, and some of the other things that are listed there. Also, we've learned from other countries and from studies within our own country that that part-to-whole relationship is a really important piece. And so with 10, how does it relate and how do the parts of 10 relate to the whole of 10? And then we're always asking students to develop some of those habits of mathematical thinkers. And so by playing some games and by developing that sense of 10, they're able to develop some of those mathematical habits of mind. And then this last bullet is one that I'm most struck by, is that we want students to have that sense of confidence and then from that confidence be able to utilize their competence as they move forward with 10s. In the recent years, one of the things that I've really honed in on and tried to put into practice in everything I do is that concept of concrete, pictorial, and abstract. And so in anything that I model today, I'm hoping that you'll be able to think about how could I build in that concrete piece, or is this concrete delivery where kids are moving it, making it, or manipulating it. And then pictorial, is there some way they could represent this with pictures, which is the area that I will do the least today. And then finally leading them to that abstract concept, which is basically the symbols or the numbers. And so one of the things we want to make sure that students have the sense of is that they're allowed to use those manipulatives. And so down at the bottom there, I've emphasized in bold the idea that we want to encourage students to use manipulatives and also allow them that opportunity. Some of the teachers in our area have actually made a way for students to have their toolkits available to them at all times so that they don't have to get up and go anywhere to get what they need to be able to make sense of the math that they're being asked to do. So we're going to start with a game. Let's get ourselves going. This is a really simple one. It's called In and Out. And I'm going to go through a couple of the basics of it, and then we'll give it a chance to see what kind of ideas you might have and what kind of thoughts you might think about in ways that you could incorporate this into your own classroom. So one of the things that I'm a big fan of is keep it simple, silly, and so I try to make sure that anything I do involves very little prep, but is very, very purposeful. So with this one, we're going to have a drawn circle, and I'm going to jump to my document camera here in a second, but you can also provide clip art images. Kids get a kick out of that, maybe a school mascot or an animal that's important to you. And then you need some sort of manipulatives, and obviously you could do more than just 10, but we're working on that sense of 10. And then you want to give kids some parameters of how high they can hold the items, where they're going to drop those items, whether you're going to require them to just say what they're dropping and what they're recording, or whether you're going to ask them to actually physically record those. So I'm going to close the PowerPoint here for a second and jump over to the document camera. And with this game, I've pre-drawn mine, but I just wanted to show you how simple it is. There's basically a small-sized circle, and I've actually labeled the words in and out so that we can develop that vocabulary with some of our youngest learners as well. And then I've provided a 10-frame off to the side, which can be a scaffold for kids so they can see that 10-frame connection at any point and help them make sense of 10. So for this one, I'm just using little puffs, and I have 10 blue puffs, and I would ask kids to check to make sure that they have 10 to start with, because I don't know about your students where you are, but where we are, they tend to lose things and misplace them. So we want to start to make sure we have 10 so that we're developing accurate mathematical understanding. So once we know we have 10, we're going to grab those items and we're just going to drop them. And I've found about 6 inches off the board seems to make a nice drop zone. And then we're going to look for those that are in and those that are out. And you can either have students build that in the 10 frame with building what's in, or have them building what's out. Any of these that fall on the line, you can have students determine if it's on the line, it's close enough and it can be in, or if it's not directly in, it doesn't matter. So I'm going to push those guys out. So I'm going to go with the rule that if they're not in the circle, if they're just touching the circle, they're actually out. So I would hope that students could physically count them if they were at that level where they needed that one-to-one correspondence by counting 1, 2, 3, and recognize there's 3 in, and 4, or excuse me, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, for 7 of those out. And then for students that needed to make that connection with a 10 frame, I could actually have students build those on the 10 frame to see that that's 5, a group of 5, and 2 more, which gives me 7. So I have 7 out and 3 in. And then if I wanted students to do the abstract recording, I could certainly do that, where they might write 3 and 7 equals 10, or I could say 3 and 7 make 10, or I could say 3 plus 7 equals 10, and I could even switch that around and say 7 plus 3 equals 10, and so they start to see that nothing has changed in the total, but in really how I record that. And so that's all that game entails, is it's just a pick up and drop. So I'm doing puffs there, but as we move into different seasons, it's fun to bring out different manipulatives. And so some of my favorite, I have to turn them on their sides, are my little penguin manipulatives. So depending on the interests of your kids, you can theme them up if you want to. So I can pick up my penguins, same thing, I'm going to shake them and drop them. And I only ended up with 1 poor little penguin in, and I ended up with the rest out. And hopefully kids start to recognize if I have 1 in, that means I have 9 out. And if I move my little penguin over to the 10 frame box, I see that I have 1 penguin in my 10 frames, which tells me that I would need 9 more in the circle to be able to get a full set of 10. To change the game, you can change the manipulatives as I just did, or you can also change what they're dropping it in. You can also change the vocabulary of that. So I doodled a quick little snowman here because I'm in Montana and we're getting lots of snow. So I would drop my penguins inside my snowman and be able to see how many of them are on the snowman and how many of them are off of the snowman. So if I have 4 on, that means that I have 6 of them off of the snowman. And so that's all that is. It's called in and out, or on and off. So that's one of our games to develop that sense of 10. And can you see the connections between the concrete, the actual move it, make it, manipulate it, the pictorial, where I could actually record drawings of what my actions are, and then the abstract, where I actually physically recorded some of the signs and symbols that are going to allow me to be able to represent what's been happening in my game. So that's in and out, or off and on, however you want to call it, or you can come up with something more exciting as a title. So that was our game of in and out. The next one that I have planned for you is Tens Go Fish, and it's an oldie but a goodie. So to play this, you just need a deck of cards. And one of the things that I've noticed is if students don't have a sense of 10, you might want to back things up and develop a sense of 5. And so I can actually change this game, and I can play it 5s go fish, I can play it 10s go fish, I can even go up into the hundreds once students have that sense of 10. So to play this, you're going to take a deck of cards, and you're going to remove all of your face cards. One of the things you might need to explain to students is what the face cards are and why you would be removing those for this game. In this case, I don't consider ace a face card. The other thing is I'm going to deal out 5 cards to each player, and then the remainder of the cards become the pond, and they're trying to make combinations of 10. So in the old game of Old Fish, they were looking for combinations or pairs. And in this one, they're looking to make combinations of 10s, 2 add-ins that will add together to make 10. So I'm going to deal out a hand that we can look at and imagine that a little student is holding this in their hands. And then I'm going to deal out a second hand up here. This will be our second student. So maybe we can have the blue team versus the pink team just for the sake of modeling. So students would not show their hands, they would just be holding those. I've learned that with our little learners, if they're having a difficult time holding cards, you can actually give them a chip bag closer that will close up potato chip bags to keep them fresh, and they can put their cards in their chip bag holder, and that makes it easier for them to hold their cards. So each player would look at their hand, and they would see if any of those cards add up to 10. All of my remaining cards I just spread out in the middle, and those become my pond that I can go fish in when I need to. If I take a look here, I have 5 plus 5. So those 2 add-ins, when put together, give me the sum of 10. So I would move those over to the side, and I've made 1 pair. If I look here, oh my gosh, I also have 4 plus 1 makes 10. So I haven't even had to rely upon my partner yet. Oh, does 4 plus 1 make 10? No. Check that. Does not. So I draw 2 from the fish pond to be able to have a full set of 5. And now it's my partner's turn because I've been able to make all my combinations that I have right now, and I haven't even asked my partner for any yet. And as I look at my partners, my blue team, I notice that they have a 3 and a 7. So they would take their 3 and their 7 and put that in their pair pile, and they would get to draw 2 cards as well and see if they now have any combinations of 10. Sure enough, they have 8 plus 2. So they would make their pair. And you want kids to continue to have 5 cards in their hand. So at any time they have 5, and so far we haven't had to ask our partners for any support. So let's imagine that this little person over here is looking and they don't see that they have 8 plus 2. And so they want to ask their partner if they have a 2. So if my pink person is asking, they would say, do you have a 2? And this person, my blue person, would say, yes, I have a 2. So they would give the 2 to the person that had the 8. That would make a partnership or a pair, a bond of 10. And they cover those up and they keep going. So each person would need to draw another card, add it to their pile, and they would continue playing. I have some bonds of 10 here, so if a student recognizes that, they are going to make that bond of 10. 6 plus 4 gives me the equal of 10, so that's a pair, and 9 plus 1 gives me a pair of 10. So I'm going to need to take 4 more cards to keep 5 in my hand at all time. The person who ends up with the most pairs at the end of the game when all the cards have run out is declared the quote-unquote winner. You'll notice that in this last round I turned over the number 10. If a student gets the number 10, what added with 10 gives me 10, and it is just 10. So 10 doesn't actually need a bond because 10 plus 0 equals 10. So I would get to remove that and take another card from the pile to be able to play. And then those of you that have been watching closely, you'll notice that I have another combination here of an 8 and a 2. that could make a 10, and up with the blue team I have a 7 and a 3 that could make a 10. They continue going back and forth until all the cards are gone or until time no longer permits. So it's an old take on, or a new take on an old game. And as I move through the grade levels, it's something that I can actually ask students to think about these no longer as single add-ins, but think about when I see that 5, that's 5 groups of 10. And so 5 groups of 10 plus 5 more groups of 10 would give me 100. So I can shift the game into hundreds go fish as students get more sophisticated. Another take on this, another shift in this, is the opportunity for students to be able to use more than just 2 add-ins to make 10. This game has also been a nice way for me to utilize those mystery decks of cards, because I'm not sure about your students, but mine sometimes didn't get all the decks of cards back the way they belonged. So I would end up at the end of the year with some not full decks that I needed to utilize. So they could go into a large bag for 10s go fish. And so it didn't need to worry so much that there was an equal amount of pairs, just that students were doing a lot of math. In this way, I'm not really using a concrete method for mathematics here. I'm just doing a little bit of an abstract play. I could use some manipulatives for support. I could use a Rec and Rec for some concrete support. I could use Unifix cubes to let students build their combinations of 10. And then to take students to the even more abstract end of things and to add in some accountability, I could ask students to record their thinking as they go and to show me how many combinations or how many sums they were able to come up with. So that is the game of 10s go fish. Can you think about how you would change that to turn that into 5s go fish? What would you need to remove from your decks in order to gear it down for students that were still just working on combinations of 5? Next up on our agenda here is Tic-Tac-10. And I'm going to pull it up so we can go over the directions, and then I will jump back into the document camera and show you or model what that would look like. So we just finished with 10s go fish, and we're on to Tic-Tac-10. For Tic-Tac-10, students need to understand the concept of tic-tac-toe. So you might have to do a little bit of a teach as to what the game of tic-tac-toe is and what the objective is, that you're marking X's and O's. And you might even give students some time just to play traditional tic-tac-toe before you move it into 10s work. So once you've done that, once students understand the concept of tic-tac-toe, then you're going to draw a tic-tac-toe board, and you're going to give students the opportunity to be able to play tic-tac-10. So they're going to be placing numbers in the tic-tac-toe board, and they're going to be rolling a die, even though I have 2 dice there as the clip art, and their goal is to make a horizontal, vertical, or diagonal combination of 10. So early on, we're working on just 2 add-ins that make 10 in any of the games we've played. Later, we can move that into those 3 add-ins that make the combination of 10. So students are really understanding how to compose and decompose numbers within 10. So when I play this game, I typically will ask students to draw a nice large game board so that they have lots of space to be able to record. And as they do that, I've got 2 Tic-Tac-10 boards prepared here for us. I am going to roll a die, and I'm going to take turns being a player. And again, I have 2 colors of markers just to be able to model how to do this. When I teach kids how to play a game, I'll often bring up a volunteer and have them be my modeling partner, and then I will have students gather around me in a circle or in a fishbowl, and they'll watch me play the game with my partner. And then I have at least one other person in the class that understands how to play the game, and I will often put that student with another student who might have the most difficult time understanding how to play the game independently. And that's one way to be able to provide some classroom management within my classroom. So I am going to be a pink person and a blue person for our game today, and I'm rolling for blue right now. And blue received the number 2. So blue is going to decide where they want to put the number 2 on their tic-tac-toe board. So let's say that they put their 2 there. Now pink is going to go ahead and roll. It's their turn to play. So they roll the die, and they get a 1. And they're going to decide where they would like to place the 1 on their game board. So they decide they'd like to put it in the middle. Always a nice safe move with tic-tac-toe. So now I have, when I add 2 plus 1 here, I have a 3. So what would be my remaining add-in that I would need here in order to make that a diagonal group of 10? I would need a 7 in that case. So if blue can roll a 7, which how are they going to do that with just one dice? They're not going to be able to. You can also choose to block as you move through so that students can not allow a student to get a combination of 10 by getting a sum that adds either greater than or less than 10. So this student rolls a 5, so blue decides, I want to keep this game going. I'm going to place my 5 right here. So now, if I look at the far end, I have 2 plus something plus 5 would give me 10. What do I need in that middle space? I would need to roll a 3. Going diagonally, I still have the 2 plus 1, which would give me 3, and I need a 7, which I can't get, but some kids won't figure that out right away. And then going diagonally up the other way, I have a 5 and a 1, which is 6, so I would need to roll a 4. So now it's pink's turn again. And pink rolls, and they get a 3. And they decide, ooh, I am going to go ahead and take the victory. So they put a 3 in here, and they circle these 3, and then they would record their number sentence to show that 2 plus 3 more plus 5 would give me the sum of 10, and in that case, pink takes a victory. If I want to provide that support, I can have students build it. I have 2 blue puffs plus 3 pink puffs plus 5 blue puffs. And I very strategically laid those out to replicate a 10 frame so that students, again, can see that when I put those 3 add-ins together, I get the total of 10, and that provides some concrete support for them. I'm going to play just one more with this because I want to model for you what happens when you block, because that's often a common question that students will have is, well, I don't have anywhere left to go. So I'm going to roll again for pink. They get to go first since they won. And pink is going to start out with 5 right in the middle. And next blue is going to roll, and blue rolls a 3. And blue is going to put their 3 right here. So I now have 3 plus 5 equals 8, and that's really all I have so far. Next up is pink. Pink rolls, and they get a 3. Pink decides, you know what, I don't want blue to be able to get a 2, so I'm going to put my 3 here, even though this does not add to 10. That actually adds up to 11, but that's a strategic move on pink's part. Next up, blue goes, and blue gets a 2, and they place their 2 right here. So now I need a 5 in the lower left-hand corner, or I need a 3 in the bottom right-hand corner to be able to make any combination of 10. It's pink's turn again. Pink rolls, and they get a 4. Do they have anywhere that they can go that would give them a combination of 10? And pink doesn't see anything, so pink decides to go ahead and just put their 4 here. So now going up the middle, I have 4 plus 5 gives me 9. I would be forced to put a 1 there in order to get a 10. Blue rolls. Yay, blue! Blue gets a 1. This gives me my combination of 10 because 1 plus 5 more plus 4 equals 10. So I record my score, and in this case, we're going to end with a tie. If nobody is able to win, so imagine that I've got a game board, and everybody keeps rolling, and they never are able to make a combination of 10. So maybe I get a 2, and I get a 3, and I have a 4, and a 2, and a 1. I have to try to make sure that none of them actually add up to 10, which sometimes can be tricky. So I'm hoping that none of these actually add up to 10 as I jot them in. Keep my numbers nice and low with the hopes that that won't happen. Where there's nothing that adds up to 10 going either horizontally, diagonally, or vertically, this is what you would call in the traditional game of tic-tac-toe a cat's game, and it ends in a tie. So with students, sometimes if they're practicing tallies, I could have my pink game board keeping track of how many games they win. I could have my blue player keeping track of how many games they win, making those tallies, and I could have a tie spot or a cat's game where they are keeping track of how many games they have won. And it's just another way to add in both the accountability as well as add in the opportunity for them to practice another skill set where once they see a group of 10, they could circle those groups of 10 to be able to count their totals when they finish with their game. So I can add in a recording component to that tic-tac-10. Students in classes that I've worked with even will play this game by themselves, doing exactly what I just modeled for you, where I go back and forth between two different players to be able to model the game. So tic-tac-10. You can also add that in, again, going with moving on into the hundreds, using 10 as a foundation, and play it with tic-tac 100, where instead of a 2, that represents a 20, and I'm looking for combinations that will add up to 100. Finally is my favorite game, so I saved the best for last. And this is the one where after I've modeled it for you, if you do have a deck of cards, you may want to give it a try so that you're sure that you understand the game. Again, I'm going to read through the directions very quickly, and then I will lay out the cards on my document camera and model this for you. Students love this game. They love it whether they're a young learner really working on their groups of 10 or if they're an older student developing their fluency within 10 and understanding just kind of the mystery of how this works. So I'm going to start with a deck of cards. I keep the face cards in this case. So unlike 10s Go Fish, I'm actually going to hold on to those cards. I'm going to lay down 11 cards face card up, and I'm going to set one card aside, and I'll model what this looks like. I'm going to use my remaining cards to look for bonds of 10. And face cards and 10s equal 10. 10 plus 0 equals 10. So I'm going to cover them up as though they are 10. When all of my cards have been used, I'm going to then pick up my piles. And I'll be left with one pile if I play this correctly. And that pile, added with the card I removed, will make a bond of 10. So it's easier to model than it is to explain, and so I will show you exactly how to play this, and it will more than likely become one of yours and your students' favorites. So I have a deck of cards, and when I'm modeling with students, if I'm modeling under the document camera, today I'm doing that as well. I'm playing with a tiny deck of cards because they fit nicely underneath the document camera. So just a little tip there. So like I said in the directions, I'm going to lay out 11 cards. Oh my gosh, look at all those face cards. Apparently, I did not shuffle very well, which is fine. It'll be a good modeling opportunity for us. So when I look at that, I have 10 cards, and one more makes 11. Now, my next job is to cover any 10s right off the bat, and since I have so many face cards showing, I'm going to go ahead and cover those up. So these are considered 10s, so I'm just going to cover them up with another card. And if a face card would happen to pop up, although there's not that many left anymore, I would go ahead and cover it as well. Now, I see a 10 there, and I like to cover my 10s and my face cards first because those plus nothing give me 10. So I covered up my 10 there. Now I'm going to look at those cards, and I'm going to look for 2 cards and only 2 cards that when added together will make 10. But before I do that, I'm going to pull out a mystery card. And I'm actually going to hold it under the document camera, and I promise you, I'm sitting in my basement, but I am not going to peek as to what it is. Does everyone see what my mystery card is? I have no idea what it is. I'm going to turn it upside down and set it aside. Now, I'm going to look for those combinations of 10, and I see this one right off the bat. I see that 6 plus 4 equals 10. So I am going to take my next two cards from my deck and cover both the 6 and the 4. So 6 and 4 makes 10. So I'm going to cover those 2 cards. Now I'm going to look for more combinations of 10. And I notice that I have a 2 down here on the bottom, and I have an 8 right up here. 2 plus 8 equals 10. So I'm going to cover those 2 cards as a bond of 10. And I keep going through looking for those bonds of 10. I now see that I have a 5 and a 5. So I'm going to cover 5 plus 5 equals 10. I am not using the cards in my hand with the card to make the bond. I'm just using my cards in my hand to cover the bond. So I notice that I have an ace and a 9 right up here at the top. So I'm going to go ahead and cover that ace and that 9. Ooh, and I just got 2 face cards that showed up. What do face cards equal? They equal 10. So I'm going to go ahead and cover them up. Oh, and I just got 2 more face cards. I'm going to go ahead and cover them up. Now I continue to look for bonds of 10. I see a 9 plus a 1. In this case, ace is 1. So 9 plus 1 equals 10. And 7, right there, plus 3 equals 10. And here's another 7 plus 3, which equals 10. So I'm going to cover those up. Oh, I see a 10, so I'm going to cover my 10 because 10 plus 0 equals 10. And I just happened to cover it with another 10. Oh, my stars and garters. Look at it. I'm going to cover it with another 10. Now 9 and 1. I'm going to cover 9 plus 1 equals 10. And 4 plus 6 equals 10. And let's see what else I can use. Here's a 2 and an 8 that equals 10. And a 6 and a 4 that equal 10. And right beside each other here, I have a 7 plus 3, which equals 10. I have a queen, which we know equals 10. Oh, and another queen, which equals 10. So I am down to no cards left other than what's showing and the mystery card. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick up those piles of 10. So I'm going to look for piles that when put together will add up to 10. So notice I have a 5 and a 5 here. I'm going to pick up each of those piles. 5 plus 5 equals 10. And I'm just going to set those off to the side. I look here and I see a 7 plus 3 equals 10. So I'm going to cover those up, pull them aside. I have a 1 and a 9 equals 10. I have an 8 and a 2 equals 10. I have a 6 and a 4 equals 10. And I'm left with an 8, which if I wanted to be a magician, I would say, abracadabra, I think this mystery card is a 2. And when I turn it over, you already knew, but 8 plus 2 makes my final combination of 10. And so when I'm finished, I'm left with no cards on my spot, and I have made all of my combinations of 10. So a couple things as we recap on that one. I'm just going to lay it out one more time, and I won't finish playing the whole game, but just to remind us, there's a couple essential parts when I start. I lay out my 11 cards, and I do need all of my face cards. And then I think about pulling out my mystery card. So I'm going to look this time since we're not playing for real. And I got a 10. Now that's going to tell me something at the end. If I have a 10 or a face card as my mystery card, then its pair is going to be what? Its pair is either going to be a 10 or a face card. So I'm glad this actually happened because I try to ask students not to choose a 10 or a face card as their mystery card. So when I'm doing this with kids, I will spread out the cards like this, and I will tell them to grab a card that is not a 10 or a face card. So I'm going to grab that 5, and he's our mystery card for this. Next up, if you remember from when we played, we're going to cover face cards and 10s, and I have 3 10s showing. So I go ahead and just cover those right up, right off the bat, because 10 plus 0 equals 10, and I cover up those face cards. And now, do you remember what we do next? Now we go in and we look for those combinations using only 2 add-ins that will make 10. And I start using my cards from my deck to cover those up. I move through that until all of my piles are full. And then, do you remember what we do next? Next, we look for piles that when added together give me a total of 10. So this game is called Bonds to 10, and it is a fun game. Students love it. I actually have a student that I work with quite often, and they will turn up their mystery card so that they know it is not a 10 or a face card, and they will play it almost like a solitaire game. And I will tell you that their fluency with looking for add-ins that make the sum of 10 has increased over time. This student in particular has gotten faster and faster and faster with those combinations of 10, and we're actually seeing the application of this game in supporting their work in the classroom for more abstract applications of making those combinations of 10. So that game is one of my absolute all-time favorites, and it's called Bonds to 10. Some people call it Magic 10. I just call it Bonds to 10. So the basic directions are here if you wanted to take a screenshot or if you wanted to take a look at that, or even when Faulkner sends you the link, you could go back to this particular game and take a look at those directions. So in wrapping up, I want to talk about a few essentials because I want to make sure to leave some time for questions and answers. Some essential tips for playing with 10. I think that it's super important that you're purposeful and you allow that opportunity to work in CPA. So sometimes we have to move slow in order to move fast, and that means we need to take the time to build in the concrete, move into the pictorial, and move into the abstract. We need to ensure that students are getting it, and so that sense of 10 is essential. Communicate that to our youngest learners' parents, and if you have older students, if you're watching this and you're teaching students where that's not an expectation in the standards because it was a previous expectation, ensure they get it, make it important, go back and reteach it. Make it fun. Life's too short to not have some fun, and math does not need to be a subject of drudgery. So take the time to discover and define things that your students are interested in. Use manipulatives that they care about. Add some game-like atmosphere into your classroom. Teach parents how to play games at home. Keep it simple. I mentioned that earlier. Keep it simple, silly. Don't go out and spend money on expensive things. A deck of cards, a die, and some beans, and you're ready to go to be able to teach 10. The other piece is, as I mentioned just previous to that, is include those parents. Most parents want to do what's good for their kids. They just sometimes don't know what that is. So send home some of these games that they can sit around the kitchen table and play these games with their students. Christmas is almost upon us, and I know that will date this webinar, but it's an opportunity for the holidays, whether you're celebrating a particular holiday or just consider it a winter break, for you to be able to send home some games with students to play over their break. Let them take home some games to support 10. Let them teach their families. Make a quick video, send it home so that those parents know how to play it with their students, and give them something very purposeful, very specific they can help their students with while they're at home. I want to thank you for playing, and if we have an opportunity to communicate further, please don't hesitate to email me. My email is listed there. It's Montana, which is what the MT stands for, educatrix@gmail.com, and I'm happy to answer any questions, provide support as you try some of these games with your students at home. So don't hesitate to contact me if there's some way that I can support you in your math implementation. And so with that, Faulkner, I might have ended a little bit too soon, but I do want to give people a chance for that question and answer. And then I also know that you have some final closing thoughts as well. So I will turn it back to you to facilitate that question and answer.
Excellent. Thanks, Eliza. I hope everybody enjoyed today's presentation. We are going to take just a minute or two to let everybody submit any final questions for Eliza via that window on the right-hand side of your screen. If you have it on the right-hand side of your screen, if you don't, then it's somewhere else. In the meantime, I would like to mention a few things. As a special thank you for attending today's webinar, we would like to offer you a 10% discount if you register for any seminar or conference by July 2nd, 2015, and mention today's VIP code, which is W120214. Again, it's today's date, W120214. And you might be interested in joining Eliza at our upcoming Singapore Math Conferences in Texas and California next month, and one in January as well. Am I remembering that correctly, Eliza? And
yep.
Where is that?
Let's see, you said Texas and California. I don't remember which is when, but they are that kind of last week in January, I believe.
Okay.
I'm looking forward to heading south to warmer climates for those and to get some good math instruction in, of course, along the way.
Excellent. Make sure you check out the SDE National Conferences as well, and those are being held in Las Vegas and Orlando this upcoming summer of 2015. Please keep in mind that you can bring Eliza on site to your school or your district for customized training that meets your school or district's unique needs. For any information on training or to register for any SDE event, give us a call at 877-388-2054. I would also like to, I'm going to shoot out an email, an address via the text box to everybody. I would like to also highlight Eliza's book, Math Play, and the link that I just chatted out to everybody will bring you directly to that book on Crystal Springs Books. Eliza, are any of the games that you went over today in the book, or are those all different?
The only one that is specifically different is that Bonds to 10. just because I wanted to make sure that you had something that was unique to that. And then the in and out is just such a simple, quick, low prep one that I thought it would be nice to. And in the book, one of the things that I loved about it, because I really wanted to make it something that I would have wanted to have as a teacher, is I do try to give opportunities for any game as to ways to gear that game up and gear that game down, because as we know, in any given classroom, we've got oodles of students that are not necessarily right on grade level, right where they're supposed to be. And so there's opportunities to take one basic game and either make it easier for students to give them an access point or make it more challenging for students to ensure that those kids that are on the higher end of the spectrum are getting their needs met as well.
Excellent. And I would like to let everybody know, if you might be on our mailing list already and have received this, but on Crystal Springs book, actually through January 4th, they are running a promotion with free shipping on orders over $35 and a complimentary set of sight word phrase cards as well. So if you were interested in taking a look at the math playbook, I would recommend doing that in the next few weeks. And, of course, we'd like to invite you to follow us, not just Eliza via social media, but us as well. And you can find us on Facebook, Twitter, and Pinterest under the username SDE4Educators with the number 4. And live attendees will receive a follow-up email within 48 hours that includes a link to a printable certificate of participation for the webinar, as well as a link to the archived recording of this webinar that you can view over and over again. You can share that out with your colleagues however you'd like in a couple of days. Now, I appreciate your patience, everybody, and let's get to the questions that came in during the presentation. I'm going to start with, there were a few people actually, Eliza, who asked, can the bonds to 10 be played bond to 5?
You know, that is a great question, and I'm so glad someone asked that. Yes, and we actually I was sitting with a group of teachers, and we are an inventive crowd, and so we thought, well, surely this must work. So here's what you would do to modify that for bonds to 5. You would actually remove all numbers greater than 5, but you still need to keep the face cards. So your 5s essentially become the new 10, and then you keep all the face cards, and you do have to keep all the face cards. We thought that we might be able to remove those. And then here's the interesting part. We made the assumption that since we needed 11 cards for bonds of 10, that we would need 6 cards for bonds of 5. But you actually just need the 5 cards. So instead of turning up 11, you will turn up 5 cards because you need an odd number so that at the end when you're making those piles that add up to the bond, in this case it would be 5, you need an odd number. So you play it exactly the same way, except for instead of 11 cards you have 5, and instead of making 10s you're making combinations of 5, and it works out great. It's actually a really nice transition from 5s into combinations of 10, and again allows you that opportunity to differentiate within the classroom. Great questions.
All right. Nancy's wondering if you have a website, blog, anything like that that people can refer to or go to.
Oh, Lord love us. I so wish that I could maintain my blog. I do have a blog. It is Montana Educatrix, and this might inspire me to go and post a blog since this was my first webinar. So I do have a blog. I'm also on Pinterest. I have a board called Co-op Ideas because it's for my day job for my consortium, and it's just an eclectic collection of math ideas, art ideas, all kinds of educational things that I find intriguing. And then I do tweet. I'm a mini tweeter, and my Twitter handle, is that what you call it, is Montana Educatrix as well. So you can usually find me just by doing Eliza Thomas. Sometimes you need to put in my maiden name, which was on the initial part of this, which is Sortie. If you can't find me, email me, and I will get you hooked up to anything you want to look at.
All right. And I was just double-checking what we can do also with all of the URLs for those and also the Twitter handle. What we can do is we'll add that to kind of a resource section within the Q&A. So when that is back up on our site, there will be a section in there, and we'll make sure that Eliza's contact info for the different sites is on there as well. Now, I did have let me see, Deborah was wondering, do you have any suggestions for assisting students who have a hard time recognizing numerals? They're able to count but not able to name the numeral.
Yeah, and that's just a lot of practice for those kiddos. Anytime that you can associate the concrete with that pictorial and abstract and do those two things simultaneously. I found that that can provide some support for students. So when I'm actually counting out 6 items, then I attach the numeral of 6 with those. The other thing I've done is I've had students make their own numeral decks of cards for your basic old school matching game, where those little tiny stickers that come about 1,000 to a page, if you allow students to make their own decks of cards where they arrange the stickers in an order that they want to, and then they make the corresponding numeral to go with them, and then it's theirs, they own it, and with all those different stickers you can even find things that kids are interested in. So they might be into dogs, or they might be into little trucks, or whatever they're interested in, and that element of interest seems to help as well. So anytime you can combine either the concrete and the pictorial, or the pictorial and the abstract, that provides a nice scaffold for those students that are struggling with that correspondence between actual item and written numeral.
All right. Sapphire was asking where would they be able to find the location and dates for the seminars that you're coming into. And actually, if you just go to sde.com/events, that will actually bring you to the events page on sde.com. And I'm going to double check that right now as we speak, because I'd hate to give you something wrong. sde.com/events.
And I will tell you that those events are some of the best I've attended as a teacher, that if you have the opportunity to go to something either near or far, it is time well spent. The advanced sessions that we're putting on, the lineup that I've gotten to join in with the other presenters is incredible, and those national events are just, everyone should get to attend a national conference at some time during their educational career, and SDE does it really, really well.
And I'm glad I double-checked. It actually, they refreshed the website about 2 months ago, and the actual address now, if you go to sde.com/pd-events, that will take you to the event listings where you can search by location, date, subject matter, whether it's a conference, a seminar, things like that. And when in doubt, always, if you go to sde.com, you can find pretty much anything, including the I think it's over 50 or 60 archived webinars in different subjects now, along with the one that we're doing today.
And the one we did today, you know, bring a deck of cards and some die and pause it at a staff meeting and have some colleagues, or at a grade level meeting or a PLC, and get your colleagues playing some games with you to support student learning.
All right, Eliza, Mary Jo was wondering, what grade level do you usually play the Bonds to 10 game with?
You know, it's funny. I actually have played that game end of year kindergarten. So as they're moving into really understanding the decomposition of 10, so once they have a concrete understanding, have one-to-one correspondence, are moving into the pictorial, I've had end of year kindergartners be successful with that. And then the student I was mentioning while I was demonstrating that game is 13 and needed some development with a fluency of 10, just did not have that readily available. So I honestly think it kind of crosses grade bands. If you think about most states' expectations, it falls right in that kindergarten, first grade age level. But you want to make sure that they're a little bit out of the concrete, not needing as much one-to-one correspondence to be able to do that.
Okay, Kristen was wondering if Bonds of 10 doesn't work, does that mean the players made a mistake?
Typically it does, yep. And the only thing that I've noticed where an error can arise is if you end up with a face card or a 10 at the end, and you end up with that as kind of an extra card, so to speak, then you just set that aside, because a 10 is a 10 and a face card represents a 10, so it won't change the outcome of that. The other thing you can always make sure of, and I don't mean this lightly, is make sure you're playing with a full deck. So always check to make sure that you actually have all the cards that you need, because that often can be an error as well.
And actually that was one question where people were asking if they did need to use a full deck for it, so that's a good reminder.
Yep, a full deck of cards for that Bonds to 10.
And we did have a question. Jamie was asking if your book has games to use K through second grade levels, and it's actually covers K through 5 entirely, correct?
Yeah, absolutely, and there are great games. I used to be a first and second grade teacher, and so there's a number of games in there that are perfectly applicable for that K-2 age range, as well as those intermediate grades as well.
Eliza, we also had a question, someone, and I'm not sure if we have enough time or if technically if we are able to do so, but a request about demonstrating or talking about a few more strategies for high ability math kids.
Oh, high ability kiddos. So a couple things that I've done with those very same games that I demonstrated today is have them graph those games. So each grade level typically has some sort of graphing expectation. So having students record the number of victories, designing a graph to represent the, like in tic-tac-tens, which player received the most and having them graphically represent that information. Having students write the directions for the games and make self-modifications of the games, so having them find ways to differentiate those games and to either make them more difficult or make them easier. I've also had students use technology like something like EduCreations or some of the other recording type apps where they will make the recording that you can then post on your social media site, not showing any of the students' faces but just their hands in demonstrating the game and explaining the game. So if they're the ones in charge of explaining that, it's often at a higher level, creating some way to represent that for parents and for take-home types of things. And then, as I mentioned with some of them, instead of just working with the tens, move into the hundreds, so that they have the opportunity to go staying within the concept of 10, but they're now working on bonds within 100. So those are some ways with those high ability students. The graphing has probably been the most popular, and even moving into timing themselves while they're playing a game like bonds to 10, and they record how long it takes to finish the game. So they're timing, they're recording, and then they're representing. But they're still sticking within that same concept of developing fluency within 10.
Excellent. Mary was wondering, are the games always with two students, or can she have more than two playing at a time?
You know, with the in and out or on and off, that could be up to 4. I find that 2 is a nice number just from the standpoint of management. That if you get too many students, then too many of them are not doing something. So if you have too many kids that are involved, the management can become an issue. But there's ways to, I sometimes will give kids a rotation where 2 kids are playing and 1 kid is the checker. So they're making sure that the facts are being recorded correctly. They're making sure that the answers are correct, and they can rotate their job responsibilities. But to be perfectly honest, I find that pairs and tripods tend to make the best numerical representation of students.
Okay. I'm flipping through. We've got a number of people who've asked the same question, so I don't want to repeat myself. Oh, we did have someone asking if to name the book again, and it is Math Play, 40 Engaging Games for the Differentiated Classroom. And again, what I'll do is I'll send out that, oh, let me see, I've got it here somewhere. I will send out again the link right now that goes to the directly to the book on the Crystal Springs website. I just set that out, and we'll include that in with the list of resources as well. Hey, look at that! I had mine sitting on my desk, but I didn't want to turn on my webcam because my office is too messy.
Well, and I had my document camera still on, and then I will show that, you know, here's an example of a game, and what I tried to do is give you ways to gear it up. To gear it down, it's connected to when to use it, whether it's review, homework, intervention, extension, lesson, if it addresses concrete, pictorial, abstract, what grade levels, things to do ahead of time. It's connected to the Common Core if your state is a Common Core implementing state. If not, it's very relevant to all of those. For any game that is able to, there is directions that you can send home that tell parents what they're going to need to be able to do it. And then my favorite thing, my favorite part to write was actually the tips from the trenches. So just little things I've learned along the way, oftentimes the hard way, that I'm trying to provide you some support with so that you don't learn that same way. So there's games to play alone, there's games to play with a partner, and then there's games that you can play with multiple groups, and there's some nice correlations and some ideas for implementation. So I'm kind of proud of the book.
All right. Eliza, do you still have a mystery card in Bonds to 5?
Yes. Yep, you absolutely still have a mystery card. That's kind of what makes it fun. So you still pull out that mystery card. It's exactly the same piece as Bonds to 10, so it's exactly the same game as you move along.
Okay. And Dee was also asking if the PowerPoint is available after the archive, after the webinar. And we don't actually share out the actual PowerPoints themselves, unfortunately, in this day and age. It's too easy for PowerPoints to get chopped up and go all over the place. But certainly the archive of this webinar, you'll receive that link in 48 hours, and you are certainly welcome to watch that over and over again yourself. Like Eliza was saying, if you want to watch it with some colleagues, pause it and play the games as you go. Certainly are absolutely encouraged to do that. I do want to just remind people also that that VIP code, if you were interested in going to see Eliza at one of those seminars, that code is W120214, and the phone number to get in touch with us to register for more information on those events is 877-388-2054. And again, that's also the national conferences as well. You can get 10% off of any of those conferences at the same time. Looks like I'm going to see if we've got time for one more. Sharon was asking on Bonds to 10 what happens if they come up where there are no combos of 10. Or is that possible?
That is possible. It happens super, super rarely, so I apologize if that happened to you. If that does happen, what I have done is take 2 cards, take that pile, pick it up, put it at the bottom of your deck, and replace that with a new card and just keep that game going. So just try to keep the combinations of 10 moving along. So if there's a pile that's not working, take that single card up or take that set of cards up, put them at the bottom of the deck, put down a new card, and see if that allows you the opportunity to keep going. It does happen very, very rarely.
So misdirection.
Yes.
Confuse the kids. Tell them to look out the window and
Exactly.
flip a card.
Exactly.
All right. Jamie was asking, let's do one more. Jamie was asking how many of the games that you went over today would you consider to be kindergarten appropriate?
I think the in and out, on and off is perfect for our little kindergartners. I believe Tic-Tac-10 towards the end of the year would be appropriate for kindergartners. I think that Tens Go Fish, start with just regular, I can't even say it now without Tens Go Fish. Start with regular Go Fish with them. You can also play that Tens Go Fish with 10 frames and with their own dot cards like I was mentioning with the stickers. So towards the end of the year with that as well, and Bonds to 10. So honestly, I think any of them are applicable at kindergarten. You would just need to pick strategically when they're ready for those games. Okay,
and actually as you were answering that, she sent in a follow-up question with how many games in the book would you say are kindergarten appropriate?
That is a very good question.
There's one way to find out, isn't there?
Exactly. I am thinking probably, gosh, I would say 5 to 10 out of the 40. And then as the end of the year moves on and you're trying to, well, here, I'm turning to my resource page here. Oh, actually, I would say more like 10 to 15.
Okay,
and as the year moves on and they become very close to being first graders, that enters into a whole other category and opens up about another 5 to 10 as you move through. So with slight modification, many of them can be geared down, and you just add in more concrete support.
Excellent. Well, it looks like we are getting to the end of our hour, so I do want to respect everybody's time and schedules. If we didn't get to your question, we will be posting all the questions and answers with the webinar archive as soon as those are done. As soon as what I'll do is tomorrow I'll actually shoot over the Q&A, the full Q&A to Eliza, and as soon as she has it back, we'll actually be posting that on the SDE website along with the resources and the archive within the webinar section. And once we do have that up there, we'll post a link on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, letting you know that that is up and available. I do want to thank Eliza for joining us today. I hope everyone enjoyed today's presentation and that you all have a great rest of the day. Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thank you.